Hello everybody, welcome to the first unit of People and the Environment, which we've called Geography, People and the Environment, because what we're going to do in this session is look at some of the basic themes that run all the way through this module. You should already have seen an introductory video from me explaining how the module as a whole works and suggesting that you really need to look at the module handbook before we get started. If you haven't looked at the module handbook yet, then you might want to leave this video now, check out the module handbook, make sure you understand everything that's in there, and then come back and watch this session once you've had a chance to look at that handbook. What we're going to do in this session, we're going to do in two parts. First of all, in this first video, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to some of the key themes and the organization of the module. Then in the next video, second mini lecture, we're going to focus on a particular case study just to get you thinking a little bit about some of those introductory issues and to get your brains working before we move forward into the remainder of the module. Don't forget also there are additional resources on the KLE. The KLE should be your starting point each week for each unit within the module. There are additional resources there including the lecture slides, readings, exercises and so on. As we work our way through the slides in this presentation, feel free to pause me and shut me up from time to time if you want to read through any of the text-rich slides, such as this one. I won't necessarily read out all of the text to you. You're better off doing that under your own steam. So by all means, pause me if you want to read through this for yourselves. But basically, this summary of the unit explains that what we're looking at here is this relationship, as the title of the module implies, between people and the environment, because that's right at the heart of geography. And it's a key overlap between the different areas of geography and environmental subjects. So this is a flagship module for first year geography, first year GGE at Kiel, drawing together some of the major interrelated themes that connect different parts of our subject areas. It provides a foundation for specialist elaboration on those themes in second and third year modules, as well as a broad introduction to ideas about people and the environment for first year geographers and environmental students. So this first unit is going to introduce you to some of those big ideas and interesting case studies. And the idea just now is to make sure that you're clear about the details of the module, how everything works. In this first video, I'll just introduce some of those basic ideas about what the module is all about. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have already thought about this question, so I'm not going to dwell on it again here. But at this stage, we're talking about geography, people, and the environment. We're just setting up the framework within which we're going to be looking at other topics as we move through the module. So one of the first things that you need to think about, well, if this module is in the heart of geography, what is that? You need to have your own clear idea about what geography is. Here's what one of the basic textbooks says, the book by Matthews and Herbert, 2001. Well worth a look into that if you haven't already seen that. But here's a definition of geography from them. Geography is a study of the Earth, the phenomena and processes of the Earth's natural and human environments and landscapes at local and global scales. So there's a whole lot of pairs of things in there. There's lots of stuff going on in geography. It's a complex, detailed subject that we're going to be exploring some of those key components of the environments, the landscapes, the people and their relationship with those environments. Now, if you start reading up in any of the basic textbooks on what geography is or what the components of geography are, you'll quickly find yourself looking at lots of diagrams, a bit like this, where people are trying to stick different ideas together and see what's at the heart of them, and placing geography, for example, in this diagram, again from Matthews and Herbert, placing geography at the heart of these three core concepts: space, place, and environment. And it's interesting in that one, well, for our module, people and the environment, well, where are the people on there? Well, I'm going to leave you, I mean, this is a time for you to pause the video and have a think. Where do the people belong in that diagram, or have we missed them out completely? Is that too physical a description of geography? Do we need more human stuff in there to make it actually geography rather than physical geography? Or does space or place or environment, do those necessarily involve people? Have a little bit of a think about that. And here's another version of that kind of diagram. This is from another of the basic texts that you'll see yourself being pointed to from the library reading list. This is another way of looking at geography, and this one splits geography up into, well, two parts: physical on the one side with geomorphology, ecology, climatology, and so on; human on the other side with economic, political, social, and so on. And then it places environmental geography as a label covering that middle ground where physical geography and human geography overlap. Personally, I don't really like that very much. I just think that it's all geography, and that bit in the middle is that the overlap ground in geography. But you're seeing already there are lots of different ways of defining the subject, identifying the subject, labeling the components of what is geography. We'll come back to that in just a second and decide whether we think that's actually even a useful thing to do. But for now, just be aware that there are lots of different views on what geography is, where the overlap between physical and human geography is, and where the environmental bit of geography really belongs. So we've said that in this module we're looking at the relationship between humans and the natural environment, people in the environment. How would you characterize that relationship? And these are just a couple more books that are available through the library. You can find these on the reading list. But the titles of these books give you a clue as to the nature of that relationship. On the left-hand side there, Gowdy's book is talking about the human impact on the natural environment. So he's identifying a relationship or part of the relationship that goes in one direction: humans impacting on the natural environment. But then the other book, Global Volcanic Risks and Hazards and Risks, well, that's kind of looking at things from the other direction. That's looking at the natural environment impacting on humans. So it isn't a one-way relationship. Even at this very basic level, we could, if we were drawing a diagram illustrating the relationships between humans and the natural environment, well, we've already got arrows going in both directions. Humans affect the natural environment, and the natural environment affects. But even that might be too simple a way of looking at the relationship. And here's a quotation from another book that you might encounter in your reading. So how do we characterize that relationship between humans and the natural environment? And they say in here, well, the term natural disaster is often used to refer to natural events such as earthquakes, hurricanes, or floods. But the phrase natural disaster suggests an uncritical acceptance of a deeply ingrained ideological and cultural myth. And they go on to say, extreme natural events are not disasters until a vulnerable group of people is exposed. And also, it's important to take account of different social groups that suffer more in extreme events, including women, children, the elderly, ethnic minorities, refugees, and people with disabilities. So they're beginning to pull apart there a little bit more complexity in this relationship. Even if we're thinking of a natural event and thinking about its impact on people, whether it's becoming a disaster or whether risk is being posed, well, that depends on the context of that natural event in a human framework. Likewise, if we think about the human impact on the natural environment, you can't just look at one side of that relationship to work out what's going on. There's a real complex intertwining. These aren't just physical or just human issues, they're completely intermixed. So here's a little exercise I'd like you to think about, and this is somewhere where you might want to pause the video in a moment and just work through this in your own time for a few minutes. For each of these topics that I've given you there, how would you label them or characterize them? Do you think of them as being physical geography or human geography topics, for example? Or if you want to think outside the geography box, then are they natural environment topics or are they human environment topics? Just pause the video now for a minute and work through each of those and just jot down or just have a think about where you think you would categorize them. Human or physical, natural or human. Well, if you've paused the video for a minute and now you're back having thought through those, my guess is that you will have pretty quickly realized that none of those topics are simply human or simply physical. They're not simply natural environment or simply human environment. All of them involve both human or social elements and physical or natural environment elements as well. You can't separate out what is a physical or a human topic. So what does that say about how we can define human geography, physical geography, environmental geography? People are very keen to put labels on things and define them. Well, can we define them by the topics they study? Well, no, because they're all involved with the same overlapping topics. So perhaps, certainly for this module, but maybe in general, we should stop worrying so much about whether something is human geography, physical geography, environmental science, and just call it geography or call it science or call it human knowledge, and not worry too much about the labels or the boundaries. So this is the topic list, or the schedule of events, if you like, for the rest of this module. And this is from the module handbook, so you can go and look at this greater length in your own time. But as you work through these topics, let's just not worry about whether they're human lectures or physical lectures, or whether they're given by a staff member that you think of as being a human geographer or a physical geographer. This subject area really doesn't work that way. Every topic that's of interest to us is of interest to us because it combines aspects of a physical environment situation and aspects of a human environment situation being tied together in some way. And so we need to bring together ideas, approaches, skills, knowledge, understanding from across the subject area and not worry too much about dividing them up and labeling them. But there's a look ahead to some of the topics that we're going to be covering, and I hope you'll agree that there's no such thing in there as a physical topic or a human topic. So those of you who are doing this module as part of a physical geography degree or a human geography degree or a BA or a BSc degree, let's not worry about whether some topics are more or less relevant to your degree program. All of these topics are relevant and important to all of us. And that view is reflected here in these words from John Muir, who you may or may not have heard of previously. John Muir was a very famous environmentalist. He was instrumental in setting up the first national parks and the Sierra Club, which was an early environmental organization, which is still going now. And he was very concerned about the preservation of wilderness. And he said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And for me, that's a great way of looking at the kinds of material that we're talking about in this module. If you try to pull out one topic, plastics in the oceans, climate change, some landform, some human activity, if you try to pull that out and separate it from everything else, you can't do. Everything is connected. If you meddle with one bit of the system, the effects will rattle through the rest of the system. If you want to understand one topic or one aspect of our human or natural environment, in order to understand that one component, you have to understand lots of other components as well, because as John Muir there says, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And that's a good starting point for this module. If you've never heard of John Muir, well, we'll say a little bit more about him in the second, in the next video in this unit. And also there's a link there that you can follow just to find out, just to discover a little bit more about him. But he's easy to look up and find out a little bit about, and he's an important figure in the history of the topics that we're going to be talking about in this module. So I'm going to come back and talk about him more in the next video, but in the meantime I just want to finish off this video by tying together some points about the module as a whole. Then we'll come back and look at John Muir as our case study. So just to finish off this video, to tie things up in terms of making sure you understand what's going on, I said before that you need to have read the handbook by now, and all this information is in the handbook, but it would be remiss of me not also to include it in the introductory session. So let me just remind you about the assessment for this module. There are two assessment components, both coursework. There's a literature review essay, 2,000 word essay plus references, and that counts for half of the total module assessment. And then there's a workbook that you'll complete as you make your way through the module, a short answer workbook, and that accounts for the other 50%. Don't worry about those just now. The second unit in the module, which will come in later in week 1 or at the beginning of week 2, the second unit of the module will focus on those, and we'll talk about those in that unit, and we'll talk about them in the first live session on Microsoft Teams. So you don't need to worry about the assessments just yet. I will give give you plenty of information about those before the time comes for you to start worrying about them or working on them. Also, it would be remiss of me at this stage not just to give you a heads up as to what to do if you have any questions, if you have any problems. If you have any queries regarding the module, you can contact me, Peter Knight, the module leader. My contact details are, well, they're there at the bottom of this slide. In fact, p.g.knight@kiel.ac.uk is the most obvious way to get hold of me. If you have general queries about the module, get in touch with me. If you have queries about particular topics or lectures, then the best thing to do would be to contact the appropriate lecturer who's leading that session. So if you have a question about lecture number 15, well, whoever's giving that lecture, they would obviously be the person to contact for detailed information about that. You feel free to contact the different members of staff and they'll be happy to help. Regarding the essay submission, the literature review essay submission, where to go for help depends on how you're doing this module. If you're doing this module as part of a geography degree and you have a geography tutorial group, then your geography tutorial leader will be the best person to contact in the first instance for advice about the essay submission, because they'll be taking that submission and marking the essay. If you're a non-geography student, so if you're doing this module as part of environmental science, environmental sustainability, or if you're a geography student but your tutor doesn't resolve the issue for you, then come contact me and I will resolve the issue for you. And if you're a non-geography student and you're worried about the fact that you don't have a geography tutorial group to talk to you about your essay, well, I will be acting essentially as your geography tutor for the purposes of this essay, so you can get in touch with me and I'll give you whatever help or advice you need. And I guess the bottom line there, literally, is that we're always pleased to help. So if you do have any questions, if you do have any problems, please just get in touch. So I'm going to draw to a close there for this first mini lecture. So this is a mini lecture that's has given hopefully a brief introduction to some of the key themes in the organisation of the module. In the next video mini lecture, which will be directly underneath this one on your unit page on the KLE, on the VLE, in the next lecture we'll talk about a case study to get you thinking a little bit more detail about some of those introductory ideas. So I'll thank you for that, and I'll see you in the next lecture.